There's one particular case. I don't know if you've heard of Joe Simonton and the pancakes.
No, I haven't.
What I like to call the cosmic pancakes from outer space.
No.
Well, this took place in Eagle River, Wisconsin. This is a case that will bring everything together. This is 1961, April, Eagle River, Wisconsin. Joe is a plumber by trade and a chicken farmer by day. He's out on his farm. He says he hears, and by the way, you can hear him tell his story on some of the old YouTube footage. But he says he hears this god-awful noise like knobby tires on a pavement. He looks out, and he sees this classic sort of flying saucer hovering just off the ground on his property, and the door is open. Now, he approaches this thing. He's not afraid because while it's a very strange situation, there's nothing threatening there. And he can see people inside that as he gets closer, they look like they're probably about 5 feet tall, wearing some kind of coveralls and some kind of a skull cap. And one of them leans out and hands him a bowl or a chalice or something like that. Looks like it's made of chrome, the same material as the craft. And he indicates through sign language that he wants water in it. Now, Joe's looking around in there, and he sees there's some kind of controls in there and so forth. But this is where it gets really weird. He looks behind him, and he sees what looks like another guy cooking something on a flameless grill. Now, the thing is, so Joe dutifully goes and gets water from his well. The thing is that when, Dr. J. Allen Hynek actually investigated this along with the Air Force back when he was still attached to Blue Book, there was a local judge there that knew Joe. Everybody believes that Joe didn't make this up, that Joe really believes this happened to him. And that the thing is, if you look at some of the patterns here, they're very interesting. So he gives him the water, and in return they give him what looks like 3 pancakes. And he takes the pancakes, which he says they taste terrible. And these are the pancakes that the Air Force decided to spend taxpayers' money on, even though they didn't believe any of it,
right,
and see what the contents were. Well, we'll get to that in a moment. We were talking about how the local judge, Judge Carter, who knew Joe, believed that Joe really had an experience, or believed he did. But so he interviewed him, and he said, now his first question was a little bit tongue-in-cheek. He says, Joe, what do these guys look like, little green men? And Joe says, no, Judge, they're kind of swarthy looking, like Italians. So okay. John Keel in Operation Trojan Horse. Now, Keel is the one that wrote the Mothman Prophecies. He's sort of I call him the mentor I never knew. When I read UFO's Operation Trojan Horse, it really completely changed my paradigm of the whole UFO field. He tended to find patterns and what seemingly disparate types of paranormal activity. But at any rate, Keel found this old press conference from General Spaatz. Now, he's one of the big generals of of World War II. And in part of this press conference, he says, there's no truth to the rumor that Spaniards are driving flying saucers or that they're coming from Spain. Okay, now, I don't think Italy and Spain had a secret space program, but I could be wrong.
Right.
Now,
or that they're particularly all that swarthy,
That's right, exactly. But this is Joe. Joe's a little bit has some rough edges. Okay,
right.
So now Keel also, and again, this is before the Greys that we think of as the classic aliens didn't really start showing up en masse until like the late 70s, early 80s with the movie Close Encounters and Whitley Strieber's books. You could find a Grey occasionally, but you're finding all kinds of other variety of alleged entities that came out of these craft. Keel was documenting several people that they said they saw people that were very humanoid, and they weren't terribly sophisticated in their descriptions either. They would say, well, they look kind of European or dark foreign types. The infamous Indrid Cold that Woodrow Derenberger is supposed to have contacted during the whole Mothman fiasco fits that description to a T. And even some of when you get into another can of worms, the Men in Black phenomena, some of those characters kind of follow the same pattern. So what does this really mean? I'm not sure. But let's find out what was in the pancakes, what the Food and Drug Administration found out. Now we have to segue again to Evans Wentz, the gentleman who documented all these one-on-one encounters with the fairies in just like 100 years ago.
Right.
He was told by an Irishman. He said the fairies eat fresh meat, they drink fresh water, just like the water that Joe served them, but they never take salt. Guess what was the missing ingredient in the cosmic pancakes from outer space?
No salt.
There was no sodium.
And that's why they tasted terrible?
Well, possibly, but it's if you find out the right YouTube thing, you'll find out that Joe said he would have never taken a ride with these guys because their food tasted so bad. Now, let's just step back a moment and look at the absurdity of this. Perhaps, I don't know if this is a real event or not, but in a lot of elements of the paranormal don't make sense. I mean, if this is some kind of a space pod from the mothership, what the heck is going on with their plumbing that they need an external source of water?
Right.
Why do they cook food and waste all that space on a grill when they could develop freeze-dried food? Right. And remember, the astronauts used to have Tang in a little bag, right? So then the other thing is, in modern day, we tend to think, again, if this is a real event, we tend to think, well, it's kind of strange, but it's got to be E.T. But 100 or 200 years ago, they would have said Joe had an encounter with the fairies. And even though they arrived in a strange metal chariot, and you were always warned about eating the food from fairyland, because if you did, sometimes you wouldn't be able to get back. But there's other threads you can follow. There's another case where some miners in California in the mid-'50s saw a little entity kind of dressed a little bit like a leprechaun. He's got some kind of a tweed-like cloth coat on with buckles. This little guy grabs a bucket of water and takes it up into his craft. Now, these guys, I guarantee you that John Black and John Van Allen, these two miners, never met Joe Simonton, and vice versa.
Right.
So that's just some of the strange patterns and parallels.